Welcome to TimSold Talks. Join us as we dive into all things real estate, talk about business, food, cars, and much more with industry experts. Dream it, believe it, achieve it. Welcome back to another episode of TimSold Talks. Very honored to have Gregg Hinzelman here. Multiplied Impact founder, author, accomplished author, evangelical visionary, very honored guest. Thank you very much for coming on here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah. And before we begin, I just need to do a quick shout out to our proud sponsors, Eatable Popcorn. They make gourmet popcorn in a multiple of flavors. And their best claim to fame was they were they were in the goodie giveaway bags at the Oscars this past season. And we've got some big movie contracts coming up down the pipeline. So
nice.
Please help yourself and try and enjoy it. We got two different flavors,
yes.
Coconut lime margarita and strawberry and champagne.
Wow,
strawberry
amazing.
champagne. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Very successful homegrown Canadian story for them. So, yeah, very
cool.
proud of them.
Okay, based here in Toronto, I guess, is where they are?
Yeah, based in GTA. Yeah.
Amazing.
They're clients of ours and got to know them and hear about the story and very big successful entrepreneurs right now. So, yeah. Okay, so Gregg, before we begin, I think our audience, for those that don't know you, could you give I know you've got a very decorated history, but can you give a brief background about your background?
Probably not decorated. I've grew up in Southern California, went to school down in Texas, and worked in Georgia, and then was invited to Canada to launch a new division of a ministry with Power to Change, which was starting new campus ministries across Canada. So I did that, started in BC, and then moved out here in 98.
Wow.
And then worked with university students for most of my career. 10 years ago, moved into more of a fundraising type role. And then 4 years ago, we launched Multiplied Impact. So.
Wow. Okay. And for those that don't know, can you explain more about what Multiplied Impact is?
Yeah, the focus is working with really helping leaders develop and act on a God-sized kingdom vision leading to a global impact.
Yep.
So as I'm working with different marketplace leaders, I find a lot of them have this incredible talent, expertise in all these different areas, and they want to make a difference in the world, but they don't often know how their marketplace skills can translate into ministry possibility and potential. So what I try to do is try to match them with opportunities, align where their vision is, what are the things that they're really passionate about, and then show them in just different ways of how those skills can be used to have a big impact. And so I think there's an immense amount of talent out there that's probably not activated yet. So that's what I like to do, is activate those guys and inspire
Untapped
them.
resource, right?
That's it. That's it.
And so what initially inspired you to pursue a career in ministry and also to kick off the Multiply Impact?
I went to school at Baylor University, Sic Bears, and when I was down there, there was this government housing projects right across the street from the university. So my friends and I did some ministry there for several years, just trying to reach out to the kids. And I just saw brokenness everywhere, and I thought a lot of the problems that these guys are facing could be saved if they were followers of Jesus and obeyed God's word. They just would save themselves a lot of angst and pain and all that. So that was kind of got me started. I didn't know what I was doing in this ministry. I ran it for 4 years, making mistakes all over the place. But then when I was graduating, I decided to go full-time because I was like, man, I love this. I get a chance to help people, their lives get impacted. I get to have an influence on the world. Man, I get paid for this. It's amazing. So I decided to join staff with ministry at the time was called Campus Crusade for Christ. So I did, started off in the campus ministry just to get training. I thought I'll try it for a couple of years, and here I am 35 years later or whatever. So.
Was it like in the 90s or?
I started, 89 was when I graduated and started University of Georgia.
So it's been 35, 40 years. So, oh my goodness.
Long time, yeah.
Congratulations for that.
Yeah, I'm still alive. That's the amazing thing. So.
And then flourishing too. The pivot from, or not a pivot, but it's an extension of what you were doing for the past, right? So Multiply Impact. For the past 4 years, can you explain or share some of the success stories you've had with the group there?
Yeah, I find that, there's a lot, again, these really talented guys who are, wealthy, successful or whatever. And oftentimes in the church, what will happen is that we only look at those people with dollar signs. We only want your money, and yet they've got all these amazing talents. And so, one of my favorites is a guy. I'll call him Johan because that's his name.
Yeah.
And so Johan is he's a consultant, brilliant kind of guy, really passionate about things like child slavery and sex exploitation and things like that. And so he's actually been involved in different things with that. But recently he was involved in, he discovered that one of the things that makes little girls in different parts of the world susceptible to becoming slaves or getting into the sex industry in some of these international countries is they're not educated. They have not a chance to go to school. And one of the things that often will keep them from going to school is they'll have their period. And so they have to skip school, and they'll have to skip it for long stretches, and then they fall behind, and then eventually they drop out. And so Johan is partnering with an organization called Samaritan's Purse, and they do these great shoe boxes every year where they give out these gifts to kids. They pack up these little shoe boxes, and they'll have toys and trinkets and books and things like that. And he thought, and this is kind of crazy, he thought, you know what, there could be some feminine hygiene products we can put in there. And if we do that, then we could actually, now these girls now have something that they can go to school with, and they're able to get that education, which maybe will play a role in helping them not get into the trade. And then so he last year did that kind of experiment with it. I think did 250 boxes, got a bunch of friends together.
Wow.
And this year he said, you know what, we're going for it. We're going to have 1,000 boxes. And so he's actually covered a lot of the cost of that.
Yeah.
He's mobilized a bunch of people to do sewing and put together the boxes. But it's cool because this is the guy who's passionate, driven, but he hadn't thought about really unleashing those kinds of skill sets for kingdom purposes. And that's where I love seeing those kinds of stories.
Yeah, no, because that's I guess the whole purpose of the organization is to like how to make a very meaningful impact, amongst the world around us, using our God's given resources and talents, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. What's when you're thinking about that and how you're inspiring all these different business leaders and entrepreneurs and wonderful kind of like successful industry leaders, what are some of the challenges in trying to get them to do this or and motivate them or inspire them? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, the target audience that I've chosen to work with is typically guys that are under 40. And because I find that much older than 40, they're pretty locked in their ways, or if they make some pretty big decisions. I've had some guys who've made some really big financial decisions over the years. It's harder to do that when your kids are in their teens or when you're used to a certain lifestyle or whatever. So I started focusing on the younger demographic, and the biggest thing is just time. People that are under 40, their kids are just getting started. They're, many of them are still having babies when we're starting to work with them.
Yeah.
And traveling around with hockey or soccer or whatever. So that's probably the biggest challenge. I think the other challenge is just the business can be all consuming. I mean, to be really successful entrepreneur or business leader, you can't just kind of mess around. You've got to really go after it hard. And so trying to capture some of that time is, I recognize their time is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
So, but I've also found that, I think that one of the things, it's another area that we can actually trust God with is our time.
Yeah.
People are willing to do it with their money, but to say, you know what, I'm busy, but God, can you help me somehow multiply my time? And I've got amazing stories of people will talk about how this deal went through surprisingly or something happened there that freed them up to be able to do that. So yeah, time is probably the biggest challenge with a lot of these guys.
Right? Yeah, because they're all successful entrepreneurs or leaders, industry leaders, and
That's right.
trying to carve out time to do ministry work or to help think about it.
In demand all over the place, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And some of the challenges. Can you speak with some of the challenges apart from the finding the leaders and finding time for them, but the ministry itself? Like, is the adoption rate, or how do you find?
Yeah, I think
the barriers.
I think that what we've decided to do is to go with kind of a high challenge approach, and so there's lots of groups out there that do great work. And we want to be careful. We want to make sure we're not, pushing people too hard because they're busy and all that type of stuff. But I've really felt like, no, I actually want to challenge people. I want to push them just, like there would be like if you hire a coach, a business coach or a professional sports coach, they don't go easy on their clients, right?
Yeah.
And they do that because they want the best out of their clients. And that's kind of the same way I look at it is that if you're going to be in my group, you're probably going to be made to feel uncomfortable. I'm going to push you out of your comfort zone. I'm going to ask you to trust God for some things that you maybe have never thought about before. I'm going to ask you to to do some really exciting things, but it's scary.
Yeah.
And not everybody's excited about that. Some people are like, you know what, I'm pretty happy to be
I'm
just
comfortable.
doing my
Yeah.
thing. I'm
Yeah,
comfortable
yeah.
here and that type of thing. So that's one challenge. I think the second challenge is just, trying to figure out who are the right people that I should work with. I'm trying to find people that have some financial capacity and leadership ability so that they can actually, so when I help them kind of grow in this vision, they can start, really leveraging that for the kingdom in a really significant way and for the world. So, finding those kinds of people. So through networking, I find them, but that can be challenging. And then, I think, and the third thing that I'm dealing with now is now that we're seeing other multiplied impact groups. Of course, you're in one that I'm not leading, which is great. One of my guys is now leading that group,
Yeah.
and so when he first started, he says, what do I do? And I was like, I don't know, just go do ministry for 30 years and figure it out. But it was so learning how to translate what I kind of do intuitively because I've been doing this for 30 plus years. With other guys. So those are probably the biggest challenges that I find myself facing.
Yeah. I guess that's the next stages of the growth of the organization, right? Is how to install the knowledge you have to the next set of leaders, who they can train the next set of leaders, and the vision is to multiply, right? So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I'm not a teacher. That's not what I do. And so building curriculum, training different, putting together training components. So we're trying to figure out some of those things. So that we could actually make sure that this next generation of people are leading it. So there's 3 or 4 people that are leading the groups right now, and so we're just working on that, and so trying to coach them through it, and it's been a real stretch for me because it's certainly out of my comfort zone.
Out of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah, for sure. Which means I have to trust God with that as well. So.
Yeah. Any kind of as you're sharing, some of the success stories, any ones that kind of stick out that you want to give more kind of a highlight to, or business or a spotlight onto the success stories?
Yeah, I mean, I probably won't share the name of this particular gentleman, but one of the first guys I worked with, and I probably have popcorn everywhere here. This is good stuff, man. When we first started working together, he's a good guy, had sold a business, but then he made some really pretty radical decisions around his lifestyle choice. He decided to, continue to live in a townhouse, even though he could afford this massive, operation, big house. He started, being more intentional about giving profits of his company away, but also taking a day a week where he would serve other ministries with his skill set. And so that's been really exciting seeing him. He's really strong in the tech space. He's been consulting dozens of other ministries out there, and most ministries struggle with knowing how to do just basic database management things. I know myself, I'm often lost in that world. So here's an expert who's coming in and giving his time and talent for that. So it's been really cool seeing him do that. He's also was involved in going on a short-term missions trip where he was able to speak and leverage his gifts, and also where he was able to share about the technology space and use that as an opportunity to talk to some leaders in another country about his faith. He joined the board of a ministry, so he's now serving there. Wow. So, he went from a guy who was, really kind of head down doing his business to a guy that's having this massive impact on a number of people. He's discipling some men, and it's been really fun seeing that. So.
Going back to our story, where do you envision multiply impact in the next little while? What are your goals for it?
Yeah, well, right now I'm working with some people in Africa. So I've got a leader in Eswatini, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Rwanda. Wow. And I've just started coaching them. Many of them have a lot of ministry experience, but don't have as much on the business side. So we're talking about how do you target and engage different high capacity leaders over there. So we're working on that, and then. So I think there's some opportunity to, once we get some scale, some of the tools and things ready to go, that we could do that. This last year, I just, not really even intentionally, just ended up starting a group at my church with 3 guys, and it's gone really well, and it's been interesting. The idea of running a church multiplied impact group. There's some other pastors that have reached out and said, hey, we might be interested in doing something like this. So I think there's some opportunities to do that as well. And so, and I've said, last year when I was thinking about this idea of multiplying and everything, a word that hit me was open source, and that, we're not really that interested in growing the multiplied impact brand. We are interested in growing the DNA. And so we want people to be living their faith out. We want them to be living with radical intentionality and being generous and being intentional with how they have a ministry and leveraging their gifts, all of that stuff. And so, if others will do that, I don't care if it's a multiplied impact brand or not. I'm not an organizational leader. My wife and I have no aspirations to grow this to some big monster, but we do want the DNA to get out there. So that's what we're trying to figure out. How can we, let people know about some of these tools? I'm working on a second book that will help kind of drive I think some of that DNA maybe a little bit deeper. So that's kind of where I see us going.
Speaking of books, I see you brought something here. Can you talk about one of those?
Yeah. So what are you trusting God for? This was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So several years ago, felt like God was calling me to write the book and really taken a lot of my years of experience and kind of trying to put it together. And it was uncomfortable, but it's been exciting seeing how God's used it. Heritage Bible Colleges uses it for their first year students, and Leader Impact has used it in different parts of the world for their training, and so that's what I use as my curriculum. So
for your book.
yeah, so I've been it's a humbling thing writing a book and talking about it, but I've seen the Lord use it in ways that surprised me, and so I'm grateful for that tool to have.
Was it the first one that you wrote, or
it's the only one I've ever?
It's the only one you're.
Yeah. It's I'm not a writer. I wrote a book. That's the difference between an author and someone who writes a book. So, but this was just kind of a lot of the core lessons that I'd been talking about for 25 years. I'd been collecting them. I'd spoken at conferences or whatever, and so I just took kind of my greatest hits talks and tried to put them into a package. So,
yeah. And how long did that take, and how was that journey? Like,
it took about a decade. So
wow.
I started thinking about writing it, however many years that would have been, 2008, 2009. And just every once in a while I had a place in my computer, I'd say, okay, book. And then I thought, okay, I should write a chapter here and maybe I'll do this. And then I was in a leadership program that we needed to do kind of an assignment. And I thought, maybe I should take this opportunity to finish the book.
Yeah.
And so, so probably the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, was super intense.
Push,
every weekend, holidays, evenings was working on this thing, and it's again, I didn't know if it was going to have any kind of an impact at all. So we've had, between what we've been able to sell and give away, we've had some people who've purchased some books to give to different countries or whatever. We've got about 5,000 are out there, so it's not a huge deal, but it's been encouraging to see what God's done, and so we're working on our third edition now. The Audible should be ready in the next month or so.
Okay.
So so
we'll make sure to get the links and help you blast that out when it comes.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And so now that was part one, so now part two. What is the second book kind of?
I think a lot of what we've done in Multiplied Impact is really talk about living your life with intentionality, and so I find that business leaders are intentional with their strategic planning, the way they penetrate the markets, the way they look at they manage their money, their hiring. They're incredibly strategic and intentional. Their golf games, like these guys can be incredibly intentional about these things. But when it comes to ministry, they tend to turn that side of their brain off. And I know someone like you who's run this really successful business, you thought about things very deeply, and then once you kind of got ignited around, hey, I can use this same intentionality for kingdom purposes, it's really exciting. Like it's really fun. So that's the book is, how are you intentional with leveraging your gifts? How are you intentional with your networks? How are you there's a bunch of different things like that. So,
Okay. Now we don't want to give it all away, so you have to
that's right.
pick up a copy when it's available. As you're evolving this organization, it's growing, did you ever think it'd be at this point, or like, are we kind of on line with your timeline? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when I started the first group, they're called Young Bucks, was 6 guys in the group, and I thought, I'll try this for a year, and at the end of the year, I'll say goodbye to them, and I'll move on to something else. But kind of fell in love with the guys and thought, hey, we need probably second year. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get them going. And then it was in that beginning of that second year when we really felt that it was time for us to leave our previous ministry and start our own, which was a terrifying idea. I didn't think I had enough stuff to lead our own ministry. It was, and so it was the biggest step of faith I've ever personally taken. We raised support for our ministry. Wasn't sure if people would want to continue with us and all that. So we did that, and then and then so the first year was just, what do we do? How do we figure this thing out? Really what should I focus on? And just it just was really really fun. I tend to be a little more entrepreneurial. I love hanging out with entrepreneurs. So it gave me a big sandbox to play in, which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but it was challenging just trying to figure out, how do I, again, take some of this knowledge that I've done for 30 years? How do I translate that? So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
And also, so where are we today? So, from that initial 6 guys, how many members, how many groups?
Yeah,
or
we've
how
had
many,
about 80 people that have come through the
Wow,
program.
okay,
And we've got, there's 2 different, Calvin, who leads your group, he and his buddy David, they had led another group. So there's been 3 kind of second generation
generations.
groups,
Wow.
and now there's 2 other guys. Actually, 3 other people. There's a woman in Jamaica I'm just starting to work with who's also starting a multiplied impact group like this week. So yeah, I think it's starting to get some momentum. Again, I don't think we were ready to scale because we didn't have any way to train or equip the people to do what we're doing. So I'm hoping that my wife is Joanne is really strong in training, and I've got an assistant named Ryan who's very thorough. He's got a background in theology, and so between the 2 of them, they're taking my scattered crazy ideas and trying to
They're
make it into
building it,
something
yeah.
that it's useful.
Yeah.
So I think our goal is to have that totally ready to go by the fall, and then perhaps you and some of the other guys who are in groups now may go on to lead that. So and I love the power of multiplication that is laid out in 2 Timothy 2:2. The things you heard from me, these entrust to reliable men who will be able to teach others. That multiplication, the growth is so spectacular when it happens well. And what I also like about it is the person who's kind of quote unquote at the top of the chain isn't that relevant. It's once those other leaders, it's really about releasing these leaders, letting them go do it. So I think we're doing well. Lots of gaps I need to figure out in my own leadership, but I feel like we're probably a year or so away from significant scaling.
Yeah. But right now, currently, members are primarily in the GTA, but it sounds like they're all
this year,
yeah.
no, actually, it's kind of
no?
interesting.
Okay.
So I've got that one group, the African guys. I've got a virtual group. I've got a guy in Silicon Valley. I've had a few guys I've worked with out there, a guy in Texas, guy in New York, and then a guy in Switzerland, guy in Ghana. So this year is interesting. I didn't really pursue many GTA leads, and also because some of my guys are leading, they would take those people. And so instead, what I've been focusing on is just where these different opportunities have popped up. So this year, next year I'll probably try to make a little more of a push to doing something locally here, because obviously I like to meet with guys in person if I can, better than Zoom. So,
We're all sick of the Zoom meetings now. Right?
Yeah,
but,
for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe talk about why the multiplication part is so important, right? And going back to the faith and why were we called to do that? Or
I think that there's a lot of these catchphrases we say in Christianity, and one of them is, if it just touches one, it's worth it. But Jesus didn't talk about that. He talks about the parable of the 99, and he goes after the one. But the command he gave to his disciples was not go reach one. It was go impact the world. It was make disciples. You should be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost ends of the earth. These are guys who hadn't traveled more than 10, 15 miles outside of their home when he gave them that command. And he's saying, hey, I want you to reach the world. And so I think the strategy that Jesus gave and that Paul reiterated to Timothy that I just quoted is the most brilliant way to get there. The idea, just real quick, when I was my first year on staff, when I joined staff with the Ministry of Campus Crusade, I had these different areas I wanted to reach, 7 different areas. I wanted to reach Muslim world. I wanted to reach inner city kids. I had a heart for the African American community. I had a heart for college kids and high school kids. And I wanted to see churches really grow and all this kind of thing. And I thought, where do I do this? Well, I worked on the campus for 4 years. And through the men that I built into, each of them went out and had ministry in all those areas. Wow. And so I've never been to places like India, but guy I've discipled is having an incredible ministry over there. Wow. I've never many places around the world I haven't traveled. I don't have any gifts with youth. I think I scare small children. So I've got many friends of mine who are really good at that. And so if I can inspire them and unleash them, then they can really do it. And so that's what I get excited about. Probably one of my life quotes, a guy named John Mott from back in the student volunteer movement back in the 1900s said that he who does the work is not so profitably employed as he who multiplies the doers. And that's really what my life has been about, is how do I multiply the number of people doing stuff? Again, I think they just need some equipping and inspiration, and unleashing, and then we can see it happen. So, yeah, I love that. When I get to heaven, is going to be a super fun reunion with all these people that I had no idea I had an impact on. In fact, just crazy story today. I won't get into it, but I was talking to a friend just today, who I had an impact on him when I was in high school. And then he went on to university, and then went on to work with the CIA, and was all over the world with them. And he's still walking with Jesus. All his family's come to Christ as a result. And it's like, man, I can't wait to see what God's done. And multiplication, when you're intentional about that, that's when it gets really exciting as well. So,
no, and I think multiplication is just another form of leveraging, right? Like
Absolutely.
using that, some of the business terms here. It's like, how do you leverage yourself or leverage the people around you to achieve a greater vision or result, right? Like,
and you'd understand that in your business, like the real estate business is really kind of, what can I do?
Yeah.
But you've looked at it from a different way. Now, how can I build a team? And by doing that, you can scale yourself at a much better level. So the differences between multiplication and business is you often have to manage that. From a kingdom standpoint, I don't. I can just let these guys go and release them and activate them and trust the Holy Spirit to get that done.
To guide them and lead them.
That's right.
Once you planted the seed, and they'll figure the rest out, right?
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, and in reading some of the books, you use a lot of sports analogies, I think, right? So how does that play into was you into sports before, or like would you play sports, or how did?
I mean, I played. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I was very confident I was going to go to the major leagues, and when I was in high school, I was very confident I was going to the NBA, and of course, anyone who watched me play was very confident I was not. But I love sports. Like I love. I'm a big, as I mentioned, Baylor earlier, national champions from 2021 in basketball.
Nice.
Football. One of the things that, again, with if you have a sports coach, I had some great coaches. My high school, I remember my junior year in high school, third year in high school, my coach was just tough. He was as tough as nail, pushed us, but I knew he loved us. And so I got to be a better player because of that. And that's what coaches do. And so for me, I think that sports has really given a few things. One, you have a goal you drive towards. And I think in the Christian walk, we often don't have goals, unfortunately. Most business guys are incredibly goal-oriented, and that's why there's often a crossover between business and sports. And so I like to take those principles of goal orientation and then, okay, if your goal is that, okay, what are the steps we're going to get there? So, I find that I love how what I've been coached by, and when I look at the great coaches like a Bill Belichick or Phil Jackson or some of these, they know their players well. They understand the bigger picture, and they're really about making everybody else successful. And that's I think that's really kind of my goal as well. Is not necessarily being the star of the show. It's probably better that I'm not, but really to help unleash the potential in these other guys. So
No, it's a great sports analogy there because, coaches may not be able to play, but they know how to direct and inspire and bring out the best around them, right, to build this team to win a championship.
I say that everybody I work with is smarter than me, more successful than me, and wealthier than me, and that's by design. I just know that. I'm often, when I'm in a room with all these guys that I'm mentoring, I feel pretty stupid a lot of times because all of you guys are so good at business leadership and organizational and finance and all this, and I'm just an idiot. But if I can work with some really talented people, then I can unleash them. That's a high leverage play there, and that's what I get really excited about. And so I always encourage people, whenever you're looking for people to disciple, look for people that are more gifted than you. Look for people that are smarter than you, and part of that is also now I have to trust the Lord. If I'm working with guys, first of all, I got to be in my game. But second of all, I've got to acknowledge, God, unless you're here, unless you're working in these guys' lives, I can't do it. And so I can aim with that target, recognizing that that's the Holy Spirit that's going to do the work. So
but I think if you're in the room and you're the smartest guy, usually it's not a very good result.
Exactly right. Big problems, and that was the case with me for sure.
And you mentioned about some of working with the wealthier guys. Why that segment, and what's the importance of working with wealthy individuals?
There's a few different things. One of them is that because I'm a high challenge guy, and a lot of people, I'm not fun to be with at a party necessarily, because I'm like, hey, let's talk about how we could change the world here and impact all these people over here. What I find is that a lot of these wealthy, driven business leaders, they get it. We kind of feel like we gel pretty well, and so I feel like I totally understand their drive and ambition to to work hard to accomplish goals and things like that. So I really like that. Wealth is generally a byproduct of hard work, discipline, and vision, and talent. And so I think that again, I like the high leverageability of that. If I can help a guy, get if I can help someone who's, starting out in their career in their 20s or whatever, I can have a good long-term impact. I love the campus ministry for that reason. I could have a long-term impact. But if I can get a multimillionaire guy who leads a company that has several thousand employees excited about Jesus, that has a big impact, And I've seen several guys write $1 million checks and much larger than that over the years to have a massive impact all over the world. And so I really like working with those guys because of the potential that they could have. And also, I think sometimes no one's really challenging those guys in a way. They're used to being king of the hill wherever they go. And so I kind of like to say, yeah, well, that's great, but what's Jesus going to say about that? He's not too impressed with you. And, I might be, but, and who to whom much is given, much is required. And so I think there's, I really feel, Tim, that there's this massive untapped potential in the marketplace that just is waiting to be released. And so I love working with those guys and the guys with the wealth. It's fun because ministries are often struggling raising their money. And so I think these guys can help with a ton of ministries, churches, things like that. So,
and just for the audience listening, for to understand what a wealthy individual, without naming any names or giving out their nominee, like, can you describe some of these in actual figures so they understand what a wealtly individual sounds like?
Some guys, I'm working with a couple other realtors that I'm connected with, good friends and young guys. One guy's 27. He'll have sold maybe close to $1 million of real estate last year. Okay, that's a guy who's getting doing pretty well there, and so we're talking about how do you leverage this platform? You've got all these clients. How can you serve them in a way that honors God? How can you help introduce some of these people to a relationship with God? And so there's other guys that one guy I worked with a few years ago. He actually, I started working with him literally when he was in his parents' basement, and then he sold his business several years later for multiple millions of dollars. And so, but in the journey along the way, we went through one of these journey of generosity that we've talked about with generous giving, which are fantastic. And then I gave him some books like Treasure Principle and Gospel Patrons. These different books that talk about how God can use your wealth and wealthy people to really have an impact. And so he's like, you know what? When I sell my business, I'm giving 51% away. And so he sold it for multiple millions of dollars. And he says the 51% is intentional because I want it to show that God owns my business. And so he did. And so I'm helping him right now, giving away a whole bunch of money. He's given away several million already. We're talking about how do you give away more than that. So those are some of the guys. But it's not just wealth. So like, our friend Calvin, he actually is, again, we mentioned he's gifted in digital. And so he's sacrificed a day a week to serve ministries with those skills. And so I think it's we talk about, there's a thing called the life principle, that you want to help serve God with your labor, your influence, your finances, and your expertise. And a lot of times with churches, we just ask wealthy people for their finances, but these guys are very influential. They've got these amazing networks. They've got expertise in things that many us ministry people don't have. So I love to really unlock those and unleash those for kingdom purposes as well.
And as you're talking about, the partnership between industry and resources, what has been some of the challenges between those two fields? Like you said, just always asking for resources and
I think they don't understand each other. I think I think sometimes they speak different languages. Business guys tend to speak business, and I tend to speak business. I like that. I'd like to talk about our target market and our revenue and our goals for ministry and things like that. And for some ministry people, those are really uncomfortable. It's like, are you secularizing things? In fact, I had a pastor once who said to me, "You cannot use business principles for kingdom purposes." And I said, that's ridiculous. If the God of the universe can use anything he wants to for the kingdom. And so we just need to make sure that our hearts are right and that we're seeking to honor God. So I think that there's a lot of that idea of how do we unleash that talent in a way that it could be used for the kingdom. Did I answer your question? I think I meandered a little bit.
No, no, I
So
think it's understanding the background and traditionally where both sides kind of came from, and
right.
not many people put those two kind of fields together,
Yeah, and
right?
I think there's great value. Like I find that from the ministry end, they're obviously strong on God's word. They tend to have really soft hearts. They care for people. Their time in prayer is awesome. That type of thing. And then on the business side, you got guys who are really good at the harder skills like strategic planning and marketing and organizational leadership. So the ministry guys don't tend to have that, and the business guys don't tend to have the other stuff. And so what I want to try to do is be a bit of a bridge, and so try to figure out how do we connect some of these wealthy individuals with organizations, and then how do we also help the ministry leaders understand these guys? Because I think many business leaders that I talk to feel misunderstood in the church. They feel like the only time they hear about money is when they're talking about the rich young ruler. The only time they
Tithing,
and tithing and all that, and it's like, well, there's more to it than that. And again, I think that's where I found really leveraging guys' expertise and influence has been inspiring for them, because it's not just about their money. I care about the whole person. And I think that sometimes pastors just, again, they're not always sure what to do with those people. And so that's where something I think long-term, I also hope that our ministry can be more effective at helping to bridge that gap in a number of spaces. So.
No, excellent. And as you're growing the Multiplied Impact group, and can you talk about some of the donations or the charitable giving that's happened, just to let our audience know the impact, the actual impact.
So maybe unpack that a little bit more. So like what types of things these guys have given to, that type of thing?
Yeah, what done, and I think there was a fund that you were. I think if they read the book, you had $1 billion goal, right? I think.
Yeah. So several years ago, I decided to pray just some ridiculous, impossible, only God could do them kind of prayer requests, and I was praying that God would allow me to reach millions of Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindus around the world. I was praying that I could be involved in reaching 1,000 unreached people groups. There's 7,000 people on the planet who have no Bible. There's no body of Christ there, no believers that they know of. They're just all by themselves. And so I want to help reach those 3.4 billion people. So one of the goals was I'd like to mobilize $1 billion for Kingdom Impact. And several years ago, a friend of mine I was talking to him. I was like, hey, you've given some big money to, schools and hospitals. I said, that's great. But as well as I do, the main thing that changes people's hearts, changes the world, is hearts changing. And that's through people getting to know Jesus and growing in their faith. Yeah. And he says, yeah, I agree with that. And I said, also, there's 3.4 billion people around the world that haven't heard anything about Jesus. Yeah. And I said, what would it look like if we had like this hypothetical fund of 5 million? So he said, yeah, let's do that. And we started talking about it a little bit. We get together a few weeks later, and I said, what'd you think of the idea? He said, yeah, I like it. Let's say it's 10 million. I'm like, we're still in the hypothetical. That's fine. Yeah. And then a few weeks after that, he says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to launch this fund with $40 million. Okay. And when he told me that, I was like, okay, thank you very much. I got to go to the bathroom. Like, I just totally freaked out. I said, God, I'm not smart enough for this. Yeah. Way over my head. And he said, you have been asking for this. I was like, I guess so. And then also 6 months after that, he gets back to me and says, hey, just want to let you know, my family wants to pull some more money out of the business. I'm going to be adding an additional $60 million for a nice round 100. Yeah. And then last year, actually, he felt like, again, the business had continued to grow. He's excited about what they're doing, so he added an additional $100 million. So it's been, it's crazy. So I'm 25% of the way there. I've seen some other big gifts come in. And so I'm grateful for, the privilege. I get to work with some, again, I'm the dumbest guy on the board. I'm very confident of that. But just very gifted people that I get to come alongside and help these guys to, help as we get to give away a bunch of money to help tell people about the most incredible person in history. Yeah. And so, it's really fun. So I'm hoping there's another friend of mine who started another foundation, about $250,000 a year, that's doing similar type of stuff. So that's something I'm hoping to see happen, is that we can really, again, people are like, they get a bigger vision. I think sometimes we'll buy these different things, and it's okay. God may call you to buy the cottage, may call you to buy the cars, and I don't have a problem with that. But again, it goes back to what's your bigger vision. And if your bigger vision is really kingdom oriented, that's going to change the grid through which you make decisions. And I think we often under-challenge wealthy people to think about how they could really have this massive impact on the world for Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too is I talk about a proactive giving. I tell donors to give proactively versus reactively. Reactively is you give me money because I asked you for it.
Yeah.
And that's okay, but it's not as much fun. But proactively is you think about, here's what I'm passionate about. I know schools is one of the things you're interested in, and sports. And so now you want to give to those types of organizations. So that's really where I want to try to unleash that dozens of times in the next few years, hopefully. So
No, I think you're well on your way there. So looking forward to seeing how that all transpires. As we kind of start wrapping up, we have two questions we always like to ask our guests just for fun. The first one is, what is the one feature of your dream house? What would that entail?
Yeah, I think there'd have to be a basketball court there somewhere. Probably an indoor court would be awesome. Somewhere on the beach. If I could go body surfing all the time until I kill myself would be great. I love that. So yeah, those would probably be the two. Totally fantasy. I've talked to Jesus about that, so when I get to heaven, I'm anticipating
there'll be a
pretty sweet hoop.
Sweet court there.
Yeah, that's right.
I was gonna say, those two combinations are probably a bit hard to come by in the GTA or Ontario here.
Yeah, but, a little tougher to find here. But here, if you're really good, man, you'll be able to find something like that for me. So.
We'll make like Drake's got one is a basketball court, right? So he's just missing the beach part. So
perfect. Yeah.
And the other question is, so what's the one type of food you could eat for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I'm a Mexican food guy.
Mexican?
Like just all day long, just chips and salsa, any kind of queso. Yeah, I have zero self-control. So if this was chips and salsa hitting here, we wouldn't be talking. I'd just be eating the whole time. So,
do you make them at home, or do you have a favorite restaurant?
We actually have a salsa that we eat. We make ourselves every August. My wife and I and our kids will get together and make a whole bunch of jars of salsa. I think we do like 60 jars for the year, something like that. And so love that. And then
it's a homegrown recipe, or is it a?
Yeah, it's a good. If you want, give me a call. My wife would be happy to give it to you. So it's really great. People enjoy it. And so we do kind of a mild for the rest of the family, and then I make a little spicier one, and then I'll do I'll take all the leftover like peppers and throw them into some queso and then just enjoy that for the year too. So and I've been a Lone Star. It's kind of a joke with some of the people I've worked with. I'm a big Lone Star fan. Can't do that as much because I'm a little heavier now than I should be. So
and they're a bit harder to find now. Lone Stars, I think.
I'm not sure if they're around. I'll find them. So if you need help, let me know. I can probably find them for you. So,
all right. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up this week's episode of TimSold Talks. Thank you, Greg, for coming and sharing the amazing story and success that you've had with Multiply Impact, and we look forward to continuing seeing that journey grow and hopefully be part of that as well. But where can our audience find you if they wanted to look out and find out more about?
Probably go through multipliedimpact.com is the best thing, or you could just email me at Gregg Gregg at multipliedimpact.com.
Okay.
So if there's any way we can serve, so I'll have my assistant reach out or whatever, and we'll try to figure out something.
And we'll make sure all the links and all the descriptions are there so they can reach out to you there. Okay.
Excellent.
If you enjoyed today's episode and looking to buy, sell real estate, you know who to call. But if you're looking to make a further impact in your kingdom vision, you know who to call over here. And thank you very much for listening today, guys. Please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps the algorithm and give to spread the message a bit more. Remember, guys, dream it, believe it, achieve it. It's a beautiful day to sell homes. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much, Greg, for coming on board.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tim Kern, and I proudly lead the TimSold team. We're voted as one of the top 3 brokerages in Markham, and we will sell your house fast and for top dollar with the least amount of hassle, or we guarantee to buy it. Call us today and start packing.